How's it going, everyone? My name's Tucker. I'm a cinematographer, and today I'm going to be breaking down a recent music video I shot on a camera robot arm. We're going to be breaking down the entire lighting setup, as well as the theory behind the shoot and what I learned from it as well. This was a music video for an artist by the name of Jade Lamack for her song Pink Balloon, and the director and I were fortunate enough to have access to a camera robot arm to shoot this video, and the general theme and creative for the video was to try to shoot the entire video in 5 long one takes, if you will, that cut and dip between each other to make the entire video in just 5 takes. To keep it interesting, throughout those 5 long takes, we had multiple different lighting setups, some of which were more moody, some of which were more high-key, bright looks, and some of which had more dynamic lighting, like lighting cues in the middle of the take. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video too, because I'm going to show you how we did this crazy hexagon lighting setup that you see here. It was a really interesting creative challenge to have to shoot just 5 shots, essentially, for the entire video to see how they would seamlessly dip together and to keep the video engaging and interesting throughout with that creative constraint. Before we get into the lighting setup, and I'll show you some of the lighting diagrams here of what we had actually set up for the more technical gear, we were shooting on the Sisu robot arm. And for the camera, we had the red helium. That's just what we had access to with this rental house, as well as a Fujinon 19 to 90 millimeter zoom. The reason we went for a zoom lens was because I wanted to do some dolly zooms to help create more dynamic shots. And with the robot on the actual track, as you'll see in the lighting diagram, with the ability to move back and forth, in addition to the arm moving and in addition to the zooming in and out for different shots, it created really dynamic camera movement, which allowed us to be more creative with the shots we could get. Also, because this is a zoom lens that is a relatively clean, generic look, we wanted to add a little bit more spice to it. So I added a 1/8 opaline diffusion filter, which is from my very own camera filter company called Element Filters. You can check them out at the link in the description below.
And after that shameless plug, I thank you.
All right, so let's jump into the lighting diagram now. So right off the bat, you'll see this giant big cyc wall all the way around the edge here. That's our main starting place, and then you'll see the camera and the camera track. So this is our camera, and this is our camera track. So the camera could go back and forth basically in any direction on this track. For this particular robot, we had about 20 feet of track, and we were just moving in and out essentially to help with those dolly zooms and to get more interesting dynamic push-ins and pull-outs throughout the video. For our lighting, we had a bunch of different setups, so I'll just run through all the lights we had on the ground and then talk through the different setups we had for each different lighting look. Firstly, on the ground here, we had a Aperture 600X. This just played as a nice front light to blast her at the very beginning of the video. There's a line in the lyrics where she talks about the sun and holds up her hand. And we wanted to just nuke her with the 600X with a spotlight mount on it to create a really warm sunlight feeling look. Zooming out a little bit here and moving over, we had this big 8x8. I believe this was quarter grid diffusion, and we did have the egg crate on it to help control the spill of this light onto her. Behind the 8x8 was these 2 fixtures here, and these are both Vortex 8s. So these are a Sky Panel S60 alternative that are even more powerful and give a lot of punch through that 8x8 frame, which really helped us achieve this like high-key beauty look that we got. On either side of that 8x8, we had a couple floppies here and here, as you can see, which just helped us control the spill. We didn't want any sort of light from the vortexes going sideways and pinging either into the back of the white cyc wall or into the camera lens to get a flare or anything like that. We just wanted to control that spill as much as possible, which throwing up flags can help you do. Zooming back out here again, we have this fixture here and this fixture here, and these are both Sky Panel S60s. We had both of these shooting through diffusion frames. I believe it was 216 diffusion, if my memory serves me correctly. But these essentially were just to light up the back wall. We had a giant cyc wall that was all white, and we wanted to be able to get a lot of level on that for the high-key beauty look. And so having 2 sky panels just blasting into the background really helped us lift the back wall lighting wise to get a more clean white high key look. Moving into the overhead lighting setup and where the talent was, which was right below this, was actually a 1200D, an Aperture 1200D fixture overhead. For this, we just had the big 150 softbox and rigged it essentially directly overhead of the talent. And that actually was a look all on its own, was just to use the 1200D, just overhead lighting, making it a little bit more moody for some of the lighting transitions and cues, and a certain look was just to play that 1200D overhead. Because this is a decently powered fixture, we had the double diffusion on that, like both of the diffusions that come with the 150 softbox, because we had enough output on the 1200D to be able to blast it through and wanted the light quality to be as soft as possible. This can be a great alternative to rigging something like a 6x or an 8x or a 12x overhead. We don't have much crew like this one. It was a pretty low budget music video. This was a great alternative to be able to quickly throw that on the ceiling, rig it with a little bit of pipe, and then you're off to the races. You don't need to rig a whole softbox to the ceiling, which saved us a lot of time and a lot of hands, which we frankly just didn't have on this shoot. Jumping back into the diagram and moving to the black wall here, we had another Aperture 600X. A lot of this gear that I'm talking about here was also provided by the rental house that was attached to this stage. So essentially we got the stage, the camera robot, the robot technician, and all the camera and lighting rentals from the same place, which really helped us save on a good deal for all this stuff. This is essential on low budget music videos like this to be able to pool your resources all into one place and pay just one flat fee to get everything you need. So while I might have made some different decisions on certain fixtures, which I'll jump into a little bit later in this video, and I might have shot on a different camera than the red helium if I had access to something else. A lot of the times it's your job as the DP on a shoot to make the decision of what makes most sense for the production, and that includes the budget for it. So you got to decide, okay, if we spend money over here versus all in one place, what are we getting by putting the money in one place or another? And in this case, it made the most sense to pour it all into one place to get access to the stage, the robot, and all the equipment we needed for this shoot. So as you'll see in the music video, which I will also leave a link to down in the description below, we sort of had a few different looks that I'll run through right now that we've gone over the fixtures that we have in this overhead lighting setup. At the very beginning of the video and the very first setup, you'll see in the diagram here, this first 600X just blasting directly into the front of our talent. That was one look right out the gate. For our second look and our sort of beauty look, we had both of the Vortex 8s turned on through that 8x that we talked about before, as well as the S60 on the left and the S60 on the right turned on to just blast into that back wall. And this gave us a really nice sort of beauty high key look. There's a little bit more definition to it because the left side of Talent's face falls off, whereas a traditional beauty look would be like no shadows. But this is a really nice sort of high key look for her to sing and look really beautiful and have that skin nice and poppy in that shot. As I also mentioned before, with this 1200D in the middle here, we had a complete overhead lighting setup. So this is just with the 1200D playing overhead, and this is sort of a more moody look. This is something I normally wouldn't do in a commercial because you get these sort of raccoon eye looks, but if you're subtle with it, or if you can sometimes play with the vortexes on the side to sort of fill the face a little bit, and because we were on a white cyc where you have the entire floor where the light bounces off the floor and back into the talent's face, you can get away with it. And obviously with a music video, the creative freedoms you have are way more lengthy and you can play with whatever kind of looks you want. So I felt okay doing just an overhead setup for this one, despite it being a smaller source overhead and therefore there being less wrap around the talent. And moving into the last fixture, you'll see the 600X backlight over here that's rigged up above the cyc as a nice backlight for her. And this 600X backlight played for a lot of different setups. So sometimes we would play this with the two vortexes and the sky panels for the beauty look in full daylight, and sometimes we would play it as its complete own look, shooting full 3200 tungsten look, just as a backlight being the only light on. And we would also mess around with it with the front light or the overhead light, just sort of different combinations of different setups. Speaking about the backlight, this is a perfect time to segue into some of my learnings from this shoot and what I would have done differently. One of the biggest takeaways I have on this shoot is that we just took on too much. Working with a camera robot and programming such long shots takes a lot of time, and on this shoot we had only one day to get everything done, so I think we bit off a little bit more than we could chew in terms of the scope and scale of it.
6.5 hours later.
Obviously, that's always a challenge when you're working on low-budget music videos or most productions. You're always going to be running against the clock and how many resources you have. But in this case, I think we could have simplified the creative a little bit and executed a little bit more seamlessly to make our day on time and make it a little less stressful for everyone involved. Speaking about that 600X backlight, one of the biggest things we ran into was the problems with the dimming curve on these LED lights, such as the Aperture 600X. Because we had lighting cues mid-take that were changing the lights on and off and changing color temperatures, The problem with the dimming curve of an LED light such as the 600X that isn't super dialed at the bottom end is as you dim down from 100% down to 0, it essentially looks like the light is just turning off as you get into the lower end of that dimming curve and as it turns to 0. This is something that a fixture like a Source 4 Lico could have fixed, but the problem is you don't then have DMX compatibility for our wireless iPad setup because my gaffer was controlling all this just on an iPad like this. One solution for this is getting what's called a wrap pack, which is a little wireless device you can hook up to a fixture like a Lico, which would give it that wireless capability, and then we would have had that lower end dimming curve to be able to turn off the light in mid shot without it feeling like it's shutting off and it's super visible. One way we got around this was by actually having somebody cut a little flag in front of the 600X to be able to dim it a little bit more smoothly, but you can see it in the end shot if you pay close attention, and it's just not the best solution. Obviously, that's what we had to work with on the day, but given another chance, I would probably just use a Lico. Another thing I learned in working with the camera robot, and this was my second job ever using a camera robot, was that sometimes it's really hard to light around it. Obviously, with having a big track and a big arm that moves around a lot, you can't put lights super close to the talent because the robot needs to move in and out and left and right quite a bit, so you need to leave a lot of space. And sometimes what that results in is it makes it a really hard time to get a nice eye light on your talent. Something that I might have played with, and I did this in a later shoot actually after this one where we shot on a camera robot, was attaching a tiny little panel light with a little bulb around it, diffusion bulb around it, to help ping the eye light a little bit of your talent. And that can work super effectively, and that's something that I wish I had known and had done on this shoot, but that's how you live and learn, I guess. Because on this shoot we had so many different lighting cues, something I would have done differently as well, and this is a bit of a resource limited thing, is have an actual board op instead of just trying to control everything on an iPad. When you're doing actual lighting cues mid-take that need to be timed out really well, it's a lot easier to do on a physical board where you have buttons and preset pre-programmed lighting cues rather than on an iPad where there could be a bit more delay and or it's harder to switch between different setups as immediately as you needed to in doing lighting cues. Because we were trying to time everything with the song and with the camera movement on the robot, which is just got to press the button and go, it made it really tricky to time some of those lighting cues, and that ate up a lot of time because we had to do multiple takes to get those lighting cues absolutely perfectly timed. The only other thing I might have played around with in this shoot is to move the actual camera robot rather than pushing in and pulling out to more of a left and right scenario. You can still get a little bit of a push in and pull out just by using the actual arm itself, but it could have provided a lot more dynamic shots with us moving left and right. And because we still had the zoom and the arm to push in and pull out, it might have been a little bit more dynamic and provided us a little bit more options rather than just going in and out, because it felt a bit repetitive by the end of the video if you've seen the whole thing. Okay, jumping back in the diagram for one more thing, you might have noticed this tiny little hexagon thing I had put on the diagram. And what this is actually 6 different tiny Astera tubes that we put together in a chase sequence so that the lighting would go in a circle. I had my gaffer pre-program this and we rigged it onto a bunch of C-stands and essentially put it around the camera. So if the camera lens was here, the lighting rig went way around it. And this was a sequence for a long portion of the video. We played with cueing different lighting temperatures, different colors to match sort of the pink vibe we were going for in this video. And I thought the dynamicness and the really cool highlight that you get from having that rig ended up being super cool and energetic. I always love looking back at the work that I've done and breaking down the setups that I had for this kind of thing because it allows me to reflect on what I did on the day and learn something from it. Hopefully that's what you guys get out of this too, is just learning how we lit certain things or learning from my own mistakes that I make and trying to be better as a cinematographer. If you got any value out of this video, make sure to click the like button down below because it actually makes a difference and helps spreading this video to more folks who might be interested in it. And feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this one. I have a few other commercials that I've shot recently, both on camera robot arms as well. So I'll be sharing my experience with those once they come out and would love to have you along for that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.